Picture the vast sun-baked dunes of 6th century Arabia. We're talking about a world of shifting sands, fierce tribal loyalties, and massive empires locked in a relentless struggle for dominance. And out of this dusty, dramatic landscape emerges a figure whose life is so extraordinary it honestly blurs the line between history and myth. Today, we're diving into the explainer of a legendary pre-Islamic Arab poet, a rebellious prince, and a wandering exile. We are looking at the epic life of Imru al-Qais.
He was born a prince, became an exile, wandered across deserts and empires, and left behind poetry that transformed Arabic literature forever. In the end, it was not his crown that conquered time, but his poetry. I mean, that sweeping quote just perfectly captures the romance and tragedy of our subject, doesn't it? Imru al-Qais wasn't just a man, he was literally a force of nature whose words outlasted the very empires he sought to conquer. His life is this incredibly cinematic journey of ambition, loss, and unparalleled artistic genius.
Okay, let's dive into this. Section 1. Arabia before Islam. Now, to really understand Imru al-Qais, we've got to look at the geopolitical chessboard of the 6th century, long before the rise of Islam. He belonged to the Kingdom of Kindah. Originating in Kindah and the ancient city of Qaryat al-Faw, Kindah was this absolutely crucial Central Arabian power that ruled over the mad tribal confederation. But here's the thing, they were surrounded by absolute heavyweights. Up to the north and west, you had the Byzantine Empire, who were allied with the Ghassanid Arabs. Over to the north and east was the Sasanian Persian Empire, allied with the Lakhmid Arabs. And down south, the Aksumite Empire of Ethiopia, who actually occupied Yemen in 525 AD. That occupation completely destroyed the political backing of the Kingdom of Kindah, and it sent their entire realm into a massive spiral of destabilization.
Moving right along to Section 2, the rebellious exiled prince.
So it's right in the middle of this boiling political cauldron that our protagonist enters the scene. Born around 526 AD into the ruling Banu Aqil al-Marar house, Imru al-Qais was the youngest son of Hujr bin al-Harith, the king of Kindah. Now, in this society, every tribe had a chief and a poet, but the two were almost never the same person. Poetry was considered, well, kind of unseemly for a prince. But Imru al-Qais, he absolutely loved it. He wrote poetry right from childhood. And he fully embraced this scandalous vagabond lifestyle, drinking, gambling, and publicly courting his cousin Unayza. His father was so exasperated by his son's illicit verses and just total lack of responsibility that he completely disowned and banished him. So Imru al-Qais was forced into exile, just wandering from oasis to oasis with a band of rebellious friends. But then, the entire world shattered. In the wake of the Aksumite invasion of the south, the rebellious Banu Asad tribe actually assassinated Imru al-Qais's father. The legend goes that Imru al-Qais was right in the middle of a drinking party when the news finally reached him, and instead of weeping, he reportedly declared, "Liquor today, action tomorrow." Or in another famous translation, "Today is for wine, tomorrow is for revenge." In that single instant, the reckless playboy vanished. He renounced wine entirely and dedicated the rest of his life to a relentless, bloody quest for vengeance. Now, what's really interesting about this timeline is how his life completely flips after his father's murder in 525 AD. Imru al-Qais essentially goes on this epic desert odyssey. He wanders all across the Arabian Peninsula, desperately trying to unite tribes and find military alliances to reclaim his father's throne and exact his revenge. He fought battles, won some, lost others, but ultimately, he could never quite hold on to power. This endless, fruitless wandering earned him a truly tragic moniker in Arabic history, al-Malik ad-Dalil, which translates to the Lost King. Which brings us to Section 3, the Hanging Ode. So while his political ambitions were literally crumbling, his years of wandering, warfare, and heartbreak ended up forging an absolute literary masterpiece. You see, you really cannot talk about Arabic literature without talking about the Muallaqat. This translates to the Suspended Odes, or hanging poems. It's a deeply revered anthology of 7 pre-Islamic masterpieces. Now, traditional legend claims these poems were so incredibly exceptional that they were inscribed in gold and physically hung on the curtains of the Kaaba in Mecca for everyone to see. However, modern historical consensus tells us a different but equally fascinating story. These poems weren't actually preserved on physical scrolls. Early Arabic historians like Ibn al-Kelbi, Ibn Qutayba, and al-Tabari document that they were passed down through rigorous oral transmission by professional reciters. These guys were known as rawis, and they memorized thousands of verses just to preserve their cultural heritage. And among those 7 legendary odes, the one composed by Imru al-Qais, which famously opens with the line, "Let us stop and weep," is widely considered to be the absolute pinnacle. Chronologically, and according to most scholars of Arabic, rank-wise as well, his work is the crown jewel of the entire anthology. It is literally the quill that conquered time, marking the definitive birth of classical Arabic literature. So the crucial point here is that Imru al-Qais didn't just write great lines, he popularized a structural format that would define Arabic poetry for centuries. He wrote in the qasida form, which is a classical monorhymed ode. He was an absolute master of the nasib, the amatory prelude where the poet laments a lost love. And most famously, he innovated the motif of the atalal. This is where the poet literally halts his companions to cry over the weathered ruins of an abandoned desert campsite. It's just an incredibly powerful visual symbol of how fleeting human connection really is in a nomadic world. His poetry is breathtakingly vivid, mostly because it perfectly blends his own personal despair with the harsh, beautiful reality of the Arabian desert. His work weaves through an erotic prelude filled with this deep nostalgia for lost loves, like the famous al-Hujr. He then transitions into the rahil, detailing the arduous, often brutal realities of desert travel. He brought nature to life with incredibly realistic imagery of swift horses, desperate hunts, and violent washing thunderstorms. Everything he wrote hammered home the theme of transience, just how quickly glory, love, and life itself fade away. Let's move on to Section 4, Byzantium and the End. But as we know, an exiled king's life is rarely a long one. Running out of allies in Arabia, Imru al-Qais makes a massive gamble. Around 560 AD, he travels north to Constantinople to seek military support directly from the Byzantine Emperor Justinian I. On his way, he stops at the Al-Ablaq castle and leaves his daughter Hind, along with his precious armor, in the protection of a Jewish warrior poet named al-Samwal. And this sparks one of the most famous anecdotes of loyalty in all of Arab history. You see, later, a rival warlord laid siege to the castle and captured al-Samwal's own son, threatening to kill him if the armor wasn't handed over. In an act of staggering, heartbreaking loyalty to Imru al-Qais, al-Samwal refused to break his word. He actually watched his own son be executed rather than surrender his guests' belongings. Imru al-Qais did manage to secure some promises from Justinian, but he would never see Arabia again. And here is where we have to carefully separate fact from fiction. While traditional legends claim that Imru al-Qais seduced a princess in Justinian's court, causing the angry emperor to gift him a poisoned cloak that literally melted his flesh, modern historians suggest a much more grounded, though equally grim, reality. The historical evidence strongly points to him contracting a chronic, severe skin disease during his journey back, a disease, remarkably, that he himself documented in his own poetry. This illness ultimately led to his grim demise around 561 to 565 AD, far from home, near the city of Ankara in modern-day Turkey. But even in his tragic, painful death, he was immortalized by a nickname. The Arabs came to call him Du al-Quryu, the one with skin sores. It's a brutal, sobering end for a man who had lived with such fiery passion. And finally, Section 5, the poet's eternal legacy. And this brilliantly illustrates why death was absolutely not the end of Imru al-Qais. Today, he is universally recognized as the father of classical Arabic poetry. Through his verses, he established a unified linguistic touchstone. I mean, think about that for a second. In a land of incredibly diverse tribes and varying dialects, his poetry provided a common standard of eloquence. His work was memorized, studied, and deeply revered by early Islamic scholars trying to understand the depths of the Arabic language. And he directly influenced legendary later poets like al-Mutanabi. His achievements laid a permanent foundation. He elevated the qasida to a classical form that poets imitated for over 1,000 years. By spreading his poetry, he actively accelerated the development of a standard Arabic language that transcended local dialects, which was an absolutely crucial step for the region's history. And his influence doesn't just stop in the Middle Ages. It echoes right into modern cultural adaptations, heavily influencing Nobel laureates like Naguib Mahfouz. Plus, his verses provided the very foundational material used to teach medieval Arabic rhetoric, or balagha. We can literally trace a direct line from a 6th century desert exile all the way to the modern global culture of the Arabic language. So, what does this all mean? We end with this question: did Imru al-Qais lose a kingdom only to conquer time itself? It's kind of the ultimate historical irony.
His palaces completely vanished into the sand. His political ambitions totally failed. Yet, because he dared to halt at an abandoned campsite and weep, his verses have survived for more than 15 centuries. In the end, he proved that a well-crafted verse is for sure far more durable than any crown. Thanks for joining me on this cinematic journey into the sands of history, and I'll catch you on the next explainer.